Good evening and welcome to this special edition of MetroFocus. I'm Jack Ford. For many New Yorkers, Rikers Island is a symbol of what's wrong with the criminal justice system. But the jail complex is also a place where New Yorkers with mental illnesses receive the help they desperately need. There are around 1,100 people in the city's jail system who have been diagnosed with serious mental illness. That's about 16% of the total jail population. And that share has reportedly gone up as the city's overall jail population has gone down. For better or worse, jails serve as what some have called de facto psychiatric facilities here in New York and across the country. And while officials say they are seeing signs of progress when it comes to treatment, advocates for those with mental health issues have reportedly called on City Hall to move this population out of Correction Department jurisdiction. Tonight, as part of our Justice Week coverage, we're taking a closer look at this issue as Mayor de Blasio pushes a plan to close Rikers and replace it with a system of community-based jails. For more, we want to bring in our roundtable of experts. Dr. Elizabeth Ford is Chief of Psychiatry for Correctional Health Services for New York City's Health and Hospitals, where she's responsible for mental health care inside the city's jails. Dr. Homer Venters is the former Chief Medical Officer of the city's jail system and author of the new book, Life and Death in Rikers Island. Francis Greenberger is the founder and president of the Greenberger Center for Social and Criminal Justice. He's also CEO of the real estate company Time Equities. And Deanna Hoskins joins us via Skype. She's the president and CEO of Just Leadership USA, an organization dedicated to cutting the country's correctional population, hopefully in half by the year 2030. So welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
We have a lot to talk about. As you can tell from that introduction, there is a lot going on here. But I want to start off to give our viewers some context with some bigger picture issues. And then we'll get into what the problems have been and then hopefully what solutions might be. So, Deanna, I'm going to bring you in on the conversation first. Because I want to focus on this notion of the population in jails, the incarcerated. We've heard that over the decades, it's gone up dramatically here in the U.S., and I know your organization, as I mentioned, is dedicated to reducing that number. Give us a sense of history here. How and why has the jail population increased so dramatically in the United States?
So, thank you. I think one of the things we'll notice is that at a very intricate time in history, what was considered the war on drugs drastically increased our prison population. And not only did it drastically increase our prison population, it drastically disparately those individuals who were incarcerated. So we start to see more and more Black and brown individuals. We start to see actual communities being devastated by incarceration with the criminal justice reform at that time, which was bipartisan, known as the war on drugs. So we have to take into account strategically some of the policies that have led us to this moment. But I think also when we start talking about mental health, we have to see across the country, whereas mental health hospitals and services and resources for mental health decreased in the community, the prison corrections became the #1 mental health care provider of where these individuals landed at.
Let me get perspectives from all of you on this first. And Elizabeth, I'll come to you. As you have been involved in this area as a professional, talk about the increases you've seen. And I guess maybe the question is, are we seeing more people suffering from mental illness who are being incarcerated, or are we just recognizing it in a better fashion now?
I think it's probably both. And I absolutely agree with Deanna that the impact of drug legislation on incarceration is probably the largest driver of mass incarceration. But also just want to add that in addition to closing hospitals and community care, in the 70s, civil commitment statutes and legislation came in that actually made it much harder for people to even get in to the hospitals that were open. So it was very multifactorial. I think, at least in terms of New York City, we are, as we evolve and are becoming better at care, we're also becoming much better at diagnosis. And we're able to recognize serious mental illness in a way that we weren't able to do in the past years and decades, and I'm sure that's true for most jails. So I think it's a combination of lack of access to community care and also better identification.
How about you, from your perspective?
I certainly agree with both those perspectives. I think the thing that I would add is that as we have forced people of color, people with behavioral health problems into correctional settings, we have exposed them to health risks. They have been exposed to physical violence, sexual violence, solitary confinement. Many health risks are conferred to them. And so when we keep the discussion around individuals and their health needs and where's the best treatment for them, we may miss the fact that these places, these 5,000 jails and prisons around the country, harm people and kill people every day. And so we make new problems, new mental health problems, physical health problems for the people who pass through there.
And Francis, let me ask you, because you're a little different on our panel here, but let me ask you about your organization. And what was the impetus for the creation of your organization and what you're doing?
Well, through my son is a person who has mental challenges and ended up involved with the criminal justice system. And I experienced how little regard the system has for people with mental illness. And I had discussed extensively with the DA on his case about his mental health history. And the DA was sympathetic, but he said his hands were tied. And he said, look, if I could bring him a secure facility, he could consider a referral rather than traditional incarceration. But there were no such facilities. I went on sort of a fool's errand to make that discovery. So at this point, after a lot of time has gone by, my son's no longer incarcerated, but in talking with a lot of people in the criminal justice system and the mental health, we recognize that there is a need for this kind of facility, and that's what the Greenberger Center is focused on, trying to create an alternative to incarceration that is secure, that DAs and judges will be comfortable in appropriate cases referring people to rather than incarcerating them.
All right. Before I get to specific problems in the various facilities in our area and then ideas for solutions, let me ask you this. How big a problem is it in terms of solutions here? That you have to be dealing with legislators. Legislators have constituents. And my guess is if you grab 10 people out on the street, you might get a majority of them in response might say, you know what, I'm just not that concerned about this. These people are incarcerated because they broke our laws. And if we can help them, fine, but if we can't, it's okay that we've got them off the streets, right? Now, I suspect there are a lot of folks that are going to say that, and not bad people. But their reaction is they're criminals. And if we help them, that's great. But you know what? We got a lot of other places we have to put our money. So, Dana, let me come to you first. Do you hear that? Do you think that's an issue that we as a society have to get over?
So I do. And I'll tell you why. Because when you use labels that are demeaning, such as criminal, ex-offender, convict, inmate, it changes the perception that the other person is thinking that person is. So it's not till we humanize, till the person standing across from you is seen as a human, do you then respond to them as a human? If you do not see them in a humanistic way, your response is unknown to you, which may not identify the lack of human dignity that person experiences. Do we really want everyone in cages or saying corrections is the cure without even understanding what happens inside corrections? I think Homer talked about it, the extra trauma and different things that occur inside these facilities. So at Just Leadership, that is one of the main things that we want to make sure is about awareness and education, because the larger society really thinks corrections is the solution without even understanding the harms that even corrections entrenches on an individual, especially an individual with mental illness.
All right, let's move on to particular problems, all right? And let's talk in terms of local facilities. Homer, you mentioned a book, your book, focusing on Rikers Island. If you had to enumerate for us the most significant problems that you have seen, what would they be?
They would be that people who went to jail were killed in jail, and that their deaths and their injuries and their sexual abuse was a product of risks that came to them. These are not simply random occurrences or a few bad apples. These systems are designed and run here in New York City and around the country to confer the risk of death, injury, sexual abuse to the people who pass through them, and that those risks are not meted out evenly. They're actually driven by race, by behavioral health status, so that somebody who has mental illness might be put into solitary confinement, where their physical and mental health would be even more at risk and where they may die. And those are real risks that these systems confer to people. And my concern here in New York City is that while we have made great progress and we have fantastic psychiatric care with Dr. Ford and her team, we still have a system that confers many of these same risks to the people who pass through, and those risks are meted out by race and by behavioral health status and gender often.
Elizabeth, when you first started doing this, and you first started looking deeply, but first started taking a deep look into all of this, what struck you most dramatically, and perhaps also what surprised you the most?
Yeah. So the thing that struck me certainly was the impact of incarceration, just as Dr. Venner said. So the space of a jail, in the New York City jail, is not therapeutic. It invokes a lack of autonomy, a lack of privacy. You're away from all your social supports. For people with serious mental illness, you're away from your treatment sources, your family. It's a very isolated space without anybody there who is looking out for you. And I was really struck by the influences of the environment on people, on everybody, frankly, who's incarcerated, and also the staff, as I get more into it. So I think an undiscussed topic is really the impact of working in a jail and how over time that can shift one's attitudes about what they're doing.
How do you mean?
Well, there's a concept called institutionalization, which essentially is if you are in a space where you are controlled for a long enough period of time, you lose the ability to make your own decisions, to think critically about things, to be supportive even. And I don't think that only happens to people who are incarcerated or even hospitalized. It happens to people who work in these settings and who are fighting for what's right for so long. And if you don't see any change or enough change quickly from those fights, eventually people just give up. And that is, I think, a real problem that we're facing in our jails.
Deanna, let me ask you about this, because your own experience, I should mention, you spent time incarcerated. It has certainly informed you and guided you in the work that you do now. What about that notion that Dr. Ford mentioned, that the concept of institutionalization and the impact it has not only on those incarcerated, but those who are working within the facility?
So the strange part, having been a person who's been incarcerated, but also a person after my incarceration who was lucky enough and fortunate enough to work in a maximum security Department of Corrections in the state of Indiana. I think one of the things when we talk about being institutionalized, what you'll see, especially with correctional officers, because when you look at how the state treats correctional officers, is one of the lowest jobs that doesn't take a lot of education or requirements to get in. Once they're in there, the lack of training and ability to even deal with the population, that is not actually giving to officers. In some cases, we're starting to see people are saying, okay, we're going to train you in reentry services or mental health if we have as a therapeutic community. But traditionally, that wasn't given. Correctional officers have a high rate of suicide. They have a high rate of domestic violence. You actually see the same behaviors in the individuals that they're supervising being demonstrated within them as well. So I really believe, as with any career or any situation you're in, having proper structures, proper training, support in the community. But I have definitely seen staff that are institutionalized to this concept of corrections and the way they even treat the individuals, because they're, in a sense, in a power dynamic position. And we also have to remember, normally Department of Corrections prisons are located in rural areas, and they are the employer of choice in some of those areas. So people don't even have a choice, even with college degrees and different things, of where they reside. this may be the only employer that has benefits and different things of that nature.
Oh.
And to top it off, we have to actually take a look at as well what happens when the first time they may see Black and brown people is in a prison setting, because in their rural area, that population isn't even there.
And that reinforces other ideas that can be destructive. One more quick question I want to ask about obstacles, then I want to shift into the notion of solutions, where we go from here. I mentioned an obstacle, that being a public attitude saying, you know what, that they're in prison, they're incarcerated for a reason, and if we can help them, that's great, but we shouldn't be putting all our resources there. We've talked about that. What about, and Frances, maybe you saw or heard this, what about the argument that says, hey, the folks with mental illness are getting much better care and treatment right now than they would if they were out on the street or in their homes or where they were, so they should be appreciative of it. Did you come across that, or have you come across that?
I actually had a conversation when I was dealing with my son with a friend who's a high official in the Department of Mental Health in the state of New York. And I said to him, look, I know from a societal point of view, maybe it would be better if he spent some time, and maybe that would straighten him out. How should I think about this as a parent? And he said, it's not better for society, because we know that it makes mental health, people with mental health problems worse. And 98% of people are released from prison eventually, and they come out worse than they went in. That's not good for society. So he was arguing that not only from an individual point of view, but even from a societal point of view, that this kind of rehabilitation was not being successfully administered in the prisons, and a different solution needed to be found. And I think that there are, our system, notwithstanding that there are many people of goodwill involved, was set up to fail. And, our recidivism rates are extraordinary. People who can't survive parole, which is another very important part of the system. You take a mentally ill person who has trouble with impulsive behaviors, and you put him in more and more restrictive settings. And we
know how many people are in prison for a technical violation of parole, as opposed to having committed another serious offense.
The big question is, are we going to have a system that just tries to lock people up and throw them away forever? Or is it a rehabilitative system? And you can look at every layer. I was dealing with a college student recently who was arrested for a drug charge. She wasn't incarcerated. But now she can't continue in her college students because she can't get her federal money, because they have a rule that if you have committed a drug crime, and she had some recreational drugs in the car and got stopped by the police. We're ruining a life. And, there's a statistic, I don't know, Homer might know better than I, but I think I heard that 60 million people in America have been arrested. So this is not a small constituency anymore. This is a giant constituency. If that number is correct, and I don't know whether it is, it's a very significant part of our population.
Whatever the number is, we know it's significant. Yeah. So we've talked about problems, now let's talk about solutions. All right, so if essentially you got to be the king or queen for a day, and say, this is what, as of tomorrow, this is what we're doing. And Elizabeth, I'll start with you, then Homer will come to you, and we'll work our way around. What's on the top of your list? What, I guess it's two separate questions. Yeah. What should we be doing? What can we do?
I don't have a one at the top of the list. Right. I'm sorry about that.
So there are a bunch at the top.
Yeah,
of the
and
list.
some of them actually we are doing. I firmly believe that we should try to be as rehabilitative and therapeutic as possible wherever these patients are, even if they are in a jail. And so certainly up at the top is to always think of the patient first. What is helpful best for them? And frankly, if all decisions come out of that one guiding principle, good things can happen. And we're doing that in the jail. I could give you some examples of those. I think the environment of care is a critical thing that has to be changed. And the city is, as you know, making efforts to do that. Rikers Island is isolated. It's very difficult to get to for attorneys, for families, for advocates.
We've learned there's nothing good about it.
And yeah, the physical space makes a huge difference. Yeah. And I think that's an important one.
Homer, how about you? What's your list?
I think that we need to be honest. We still need to be honest about what happens behind bars and be much more honest about the health risks that are conferred. We should know how many of the deaths that occur in Rikers and around the country in jail are preventable or attributable to the jail itself. We don't know that. That doesn't get reported. But I think that more broadly, while we close the aperture, while we have fewer people going into jails and prisons, which we must do, and closing Rikers is part of that, we must also then invest in community resources. And I don't mean big towers, big inpatient mental health centers, but many of the community resources that were destroyed through urban renewal before the war on drugs even came around. And then certainly during the war on drugs, community mental health, educational and vocational services. We have to take the dollars that we would have been spending on this justice system and invest them there. And I find that that part of this equation is often absent, the discussion of simply reforming bail or having fewer jails. And it takes money and investment. And just as when we closed all these inpatient mental health centers, in the 70s and 80s, we need to invest in the resources that people need so they don't have law enforcement contact.
I saw a number that was staggering about what it costs us for a single person who was incarcerated in Rikers Island for a year. And if I remember correctly, it was more than $300,000. It was and Deanna's shaking her head, yeah, so I'm right or close on the number. Now, here's my question. Rikers gets closed within the time schedule that's suggested, and there are 4 new facilities that are established. Do you think that the various legislators have the appetite to say, all right, we're going to save a lot of money, but let's just not put that money in the coffers and sit on it. Let's redirect that money, and a significant portion of it should be in the new facilities, for instance, for some of the things that we're talking about, for people who are incarcerated who have mental illness. Do all of you see an appetite to do that? That we can make progress, we can redirect that money and make progress either in new facilities or transfers to hospitals or whatever the suggestion is going to be. I got about 2 minutes left, so I'm going to ask each of you to weigh in sort of quickly, if you would. Deanna, I'll start with you. Do you see an appetite there for people saying, okay, we're going to redirect that money into these areas?
Yes, and not only in those areas beside facilities, but also in the communities that have been most devastated by incarceration, to actually invest in those communities, because communities that thrive actually produces individuals that thrive.
Right. Elizabeth, how about you? Do you see it?
I'm witnessing it.
You are?
Yeah. In the design of these new jails, there is a lot of thought and attention being paid to making them therapeutic and better able to deliver the services.
Is it fair to say, it's a subjective term, but you're fairly optimistic based upon what you're seeing, that in terms of things such as design and willingness and ability to provide staff, that we're moving forward?
I am optimistic, and actually I couldn't be in my job, I think, if I wasn't optimistic, but I do think it's also realistic optimism.
Okay, all right. And Francis, how about you, from your perspective?
When I started learning about the criminal justice system, I went on a listening tour and I talked with a lot of people, from inmates to heads of institutions. And there seemed to be a lot of unanimous opinion that the system wasn't working. And I think that that's given the impetus to the closed Rikers. And I think there's broad appreciation for the fact that our public policy that's informed our actions for a long time have led us to a bad place. And that there is an impetus for change. We're seeing it in New York, we're seeing it in Florida, we're seeing it in California. There's a recognition that something new has to happen here.
And I guess if you look at it, before you get a solution to a problem, you have to recognize that a problem exists.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like at least we are there. Look, this has been a very revealing and thoughtful discussion. I certainly appreciate all of you weighing in and offering your thoughts on this, and perhaps as we move forward, we can talk a little bit more with all of you. But again, our thanks for all the work that you're doing and the thought that you're putting into this. Thank you so much for joining us. And a reminder for all of you, Justice Week wraps up tomorrow night right here on Metro Focus. We look forward to seeing you then. Have a good night.